Assalamu alaikum. My name is Maryam Sharif, and I'm a newbie or an amateur with gardening and everything to do with plants, the growing of, the taking care of, and then the harvesting. So I am part of the Masumin Garden Committee, as we call ourselves. We have, as you might have seen by now, a little garden of our own in the community center. And we are part of a system where we're responsible for individual beds or individual items being grown in the garden, and I am responsible for a potato bed. However, weekly sessions for me include looking after everything else, whereby I do some watering and some pruning, some harvesting if needed. We are responsible for our own beds, but we watch out for other people's beds and needs as well. In terms of what the Masumin Garden and the gardening program means to me, I think by far the most important is the fact that it's a small, really small area that's dedicated to nature and to gardening, and you really have direct contact with nature and agriculture per se. Like I said before, I'm a gardening newbie, and so there's a lot to learn for me. It's an opportunity to learn firsthand about gardening techniques and crops being grown, but it's also a very hands-off mentorship program, I would like to say, whereby I'm here, I'm doing my own work, there's always support for me, and I can always ask for help when I need it, but I'm really doing everything with my own hands, and it's a very first-hand experience. And finally, it is an opportunity to connect through the garden to the community. So under these circumstances where we don't come together anymore, it is a chance whereby one at a time or one family at a time, we come together for a cause that is community-based. So it really enhances a feeling of belonging to a community and doing something together while not really coming together. Why I got involved in the Masumin Garden Committee and in this whole program primarily was this chance for my family and I to come together and to do something together. So it is something productive that we look forward to every week. I usually come with my husband and his parents, and it's something that everyone looks forward to because we all want to see what new thing has grown, what needs to be taken care of, what has changed within just 1 week. So it is very much a family activity that we do together and work towards. As I mentioned before, it's a chance for me to learn firsthand about gardening and gardening techniques, what can be grown and how it's grown, and of course how to harvest and when to harvest. The idea for this, of course, is on the long run. If I were to start up my own garden or I were to take part in a bigger planting program, I would have the experience that it takes, or I would have at least some knowledge that it takes to be successful for such an endeavor. Lastly, I would like to say that we all sit at the table every day, several times a day to eat, but at least I don't think about where that food comes from. And being a part of the garden committee and coming here at least once a week means that I am forced to think about where my food comes from. Or for example, if I could use a couple potatoes a day, it actually takes a while for potatoes to grow. So it is in the end appreciation for the life cycle of food as it grows and matures, and then the sustenance that it provides us. Finally, a few lessons that I've learned through this program since it started. I would like to go over a few general lessons that I would have learned. The big one is that patience and a lot of patience and passion and consciousness when gardening is really what is key to the success of gardening. I mean, I can't come here and just be thinking of something else and just run through the garden and be done with it and expect things to go okay. So a lot of passion, a lot of consciousness while doing the gardening, I feel is key to its success. The other thing about gardening is it might be daunting to some of us and to many of us here that may never have explored it or be too scared to explore it. I was there once. And this is an opportunity where you enter into a world where you get to learn new things even though you never thought you could. It's also something, gardening is also something that can be practiced anywhere, including your own backyard. If you were to pick the right crop and pick the right time, you can grow it anywhere. The other thing that I've learned is that there's a season and a time for everything. So everything comes in its own time. For example, potatoes can grow almost over 3 months. It takes that while, of course, depending on the species of the potato, but up to 3 months of growing can take a lot of patience. But if we were to understand the time frame that it takes for potatoes, it really makes me realize that there is a time for everything, that there's a season for everything. It won't just grow anywhere. Of course, potatoes can also be grown and stored in a way by which they can be used for months after the harvesting season. A few specific things that I've learned is if you saw any of the watering clips or how to water plants, the idea is to water as close to the soil as possible, because when you water from a height above the soil and there is a splash of the soil onto the plant, there is a risk for infection of the plant, and so the plants get infested with bugs because whatever comes from the soil splashes back onto the plants. I found that very interesting. The other interesting thing that I've learned is that when a plant flowers, it is actually matured. The maturity of the plant comes from when you see the flowers on it, and that is when it is likely not going to grow anymore further than that, and the fruit or the vegetable is likely still developing. A very awesome fact that I learned is that a zucchini can grow up to 2 inches overnight. And it was very interesting when I learned this, because I never expected a vegetable to grow that fast. But one of the senior mentors mentioned this, and I found it very intriguing. Zucchinis are also vegetables that if they're not harvested at the right time, meaning at the right length and girth, then they're likely to grow seeds, and then they're not very ideal for cooking as we know it, but they can still be used for baking. Finally, there's something called mildew, which starts to develop on leaves sometimes. It looks like a white powdery layer on the leaf, and that is usually one of the primary signs of infection of that plant. Sometimes you can sort of wipe it off, or sometimes you need to then cut off the leaf or prune the plant a little bit. And that is a little bit about what we do here. Watermelons, as we all know, are vines. It's a vine-like plant, which means that it needs a support system for it to grow properly. And then watermelons as a fruit, as we all know, are pretty heavy. And so when they start to dangle off the vines, they usually need a bit more support for the weight. Given that, there's an interesting concept called hammocking, where little pieces of cloth are tied to either side of the watermelon, and the watermelon is placed in a hammock. This helps the watermelon to be supported, if not fully, then at least partially, as it grows in weight and size. Right here is an example of a hammock. It looks pretty much like the hammock that a human could use. It is tied on 2 ends of what we call the trellis, the wooden frame. And it is usually made of, it can be made at home. It's usually of elastic material, whereby the watermelon is placed within the hammock, and as it grows, the elastic material stretches to accommodate the size and the weight as far as it can. Occasionally you will see that they're supported on one of the planks of the trellis, but the hammocking is supposed to be a primary sort of support as it grows and gets heavier.